Welcome to the Mindfulness Academy Podcast. I'm your host, Amy Morgan. And on today's show, we have Brent Freeman of Camptown. Welcome, Brent.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I want to tell you guys a little bit about who Brent is and what brings him on the show here. Brent rejoined Camptown, which we'll talk more about Camptown here in a moment, as president and executive director in 2021 after 12 years working as a teacher, school leader, and district administrator in the heart of Indianapolis. Brent holds a bachelor's degree in sports management, a master's degree in teaching and educational leadership, and he is currently becoming certified as a nature and forest therapy guide. Brent serves as a deacon at Redeemer Presbyterian Church. He is often hiking, camping, and biking in our public lands along with his wife, Alex, and their 4 kids. So welcome to the show. I'm excited for a conversation today. I've been thinking about it here for a while, all the things that we are going to get into today. So we'll start with a little bit about how we met. I assume it was just through our connections with Camptown, and then also maybe it was more so my husband working on your house. Maybe that's what it was, but I'd already known and been a little bit involved with Camptown. That's probably how we connected then. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know which exactly would have come first. You certainly knew of Camptown before you and I had met, but I certainly remember meeting you when one of your children was out, at a state park and participating in a Camptown program through their school. And so I recall that a few years ago. And I think that's what sparked this, even this initial kind of conversation about mindfulness in nature, right? And you shared a little bit about your work in this space, which sounded very exciting.
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to hear a little bit about who you are, a little bit of backstory. Some folks will even go back to where they were born, where they grew up. Just give us a sense of who Brent Freeman is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a great question. I'm from Indianapolis. Really have lived in and around this area my whole life, and so was really fortunate as a kid to grow up in a family that my father was a professional Boy Scout, which meant he was involved in their outdoor programs, and that meant that I got to live for 6 of my summers as a boy in summer camp. And so we would literally move out of our house and then go to, camp for 8 or 10 or summers at the time, maybe even 12 weeks and live there. And so that was really formative, in my upbringing, to spend time outdoors and really kind of has shaped in many ways professionally, even right today, the things that I'm involved in. But certainly my interests and, as you said, how we spend time as a family. But yeah, I grew up in Central Indiana, and you mentioned went up to Taylor University. One other sort of highlight that has nudged me into this space is just working at a wilderness camp. Right, a lot of folks have worked in camps at various points in their young adulthood. But for me, Deerfoot Lodge in as about a 21-year-old, for me, was a very formative place in experiencing the power of wilderness, and its ability to help shape us and help shape young people. And so, yeah, those are a few highlights.
Oh, wonderful. Camp is so amazing. When I think back to my childhood, it's definitely top 5 or 10 memories. It's just, wandering along by yourself and in the quiet trees. I don't know. There's just something really sacred about that. Just
Yeah.
you and nature. So I'm glad that you had that experience for all those summers. So you joined Camptown in 2021 as president and executive director. I know you'd spent a little bit of time there before that as well. So you can give us a little heads up on what you're doing there. But I would love for you mostly to talk about what Camptown is all about.
Yeah, that's great. I did, as you mentioned, I worked at Camptown and as a program director right out of undergrad, basically, and so got to experience our mission firsthand then, and yeah, and then was really hooked, to be honest
Mm.
with you, at that time, because it's about using the outdoors as a classroom and as a space and as a venue for teaching about life. And we say to challenge, mentor, and teach, youth about life. And so outdoor adventure is woven into that. The settings are state parks and national parks and state forests, and so we partner with youth organizations and schools across central Indiana. And last year served about 5,000 kids. About 4,500 kids. This year will be about 5,000 kids. And and through, a mix of day programs, after school programs, sort of week-long adventure trips. And of course, we also here at our headquarters have an indoor climbing facility that we can activate with groups and use that in the wintertime, even more so, as it's a little bit more difficult to spend prolonged time outdoors. So that's an overview of Camptown.
Wonderful. And the indoor climbing facility is called
The Crux, right?
The Crux.
The Crux, aptly named. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. So many offerings. I'm wondering what drew you to the position at Camptown. I have an inkling knowing your background, but tell me about it.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, sort of coming out of undergrad, it was a friend who called me. Matter of fact, I was working at Olympic National Park at the time in Washington for a short term. It was a seasonal role, after graduating from college, and he said, "Hey, I've got this family member that's running this small nonprofit. Turns out that's my predecessor, in this role, who was the executive director here." And he said, he's really interested in a lot of the same things you are. You guys should talk. I think he's hiring. And called him up, and I was like, I didn't know this place existed, but what an incredible job. And who we get to work with is really where I feel I belong, and that's working with kids in the city, and we've chosen to, and Amy, you can relate to this, I'm sure too, but like to be intentional about raising our kids in diverse spaces, raising kids in the city, and so my career in many ways has led me into those spaces as well, working in public schools and working in special education, and in many ways being drawn to, say, some may say, the more challenging environments. But I see it as, there's so much beautiful potential. And so how can we together try to realize that potential? And so that drew me to Camptown too, just who we get to work with and who we get to be in relationship with and build community with, our kids from our city, and some of whom are hurting, and some of whom are carrying heavy things, dealing with a lot as young people, but yet have, as mentioned, have just immense potential, and need people to believe in them and people to teach them and help uncover, that potential as they grow up. And so that's a great delight. And, Camptown, is the venue for that for me right now.
Excellent. When we first spoke and we were exploring the idea of you coming on the show, you said Camptown isn't full of mindfulness experts. You said that right out the gate.
Right.
However, I experienced the mindfulness activities that you provided to, I believe it was my son's school. I'm trying to remember if it was my son's or my daughter's class.
It was your son.
It was my son, yeah.
Yep.
And that was a wonderful day. And I thought, wow, combining mindfulness, which I'm passionate about, with nature, which I also enjoy, is really lovely. And I would also say that beyond the activities that you're leading the kids in, you're working toward your nature and forest therapy guide certification, your accreditation from the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy. Kind of like with Camptown with you. What? I didn't realize a place like this existed. I would love to hear more about this group and what you intend to gain and share as a result of getting that accreditation. And I know that you talked for just a minute when we spoke earlier about kind of maybe some inspiration from the Japanese forest bathing. If you could maybe touch on that and even what that is, that would be an interesting thing to talk about on the show. So tell me about the group and what you intend to gain, and then we can kind of meander from there.
Yeah, it's a really interesting organization, as I understand it, based out of California, so Western United States. But a gentleman named Amos Clifford, who has launched a training sort of program and really drawn a fair amount of people into it. And so they're international now. Is the ANFT for short, but Association for Nature and Forest Therapy. And they, provide a 6-month training with a 4-day immersion that produces or allows people like me to become certified forest and nature therapy guides. And so they are deliberate in saying, I won't be a therapist, but rather a guide, and that the forest can be the therapist, right? And so it is built off of, as you mentioned, the Japanese Shinrin Yoku, and I'm always concerned I'll mispronounce that badly. But that concept of forest bathing, which is to immerse into the forest and a natural environment, and in some ways, wash away the stress or the hurriedness of typical life, and really experience some physiological and emotional benefits to that. And so this model that I'm currently being trained in is an adaptation or a similar type as Shinrin Yoku is within Japan. And so of course, in Japan, the urban areas are so dense and the big cities, and so there's some real crises occurring of stress and high blood pressure, and these chronic health issues from overexposure to stress, and not always a release of said stress. And so they'll actually at times prescribe forest bathing, right? And treat it almost in a medical model, but it's certainly non-traditional. But there's some really interesting emergent evidence of reduction in cortisol levels and health benefits of things such as lower blood pressure, and so that's interesting, right? I mean, to some of us that might
Very.
be intuitive, like I do well when I'm outside, or like I feel better when I'm outside. Now on it's 99 degrees or whatever today in Indianapolis, but on a typical day it might be peaceful and sort of letting us reset. But it's interesting to see then the health benefits that are emerging, in the research as well, to kind of corroborate what some of us might just think is intuitive.
Yeah, it seems like in Indiana even that it seems that doctors are even prescribing or recommending spending time in meditation or yoga as ways of self-regulating. I mean, just
Hmm.
maybe alongside other types of therapy, but hey, your
Hmm.
body is obviously stressed. This is a stress response.
Hmm.
So just take what you can in your own hands and do these simple practices. So that's
Hmm.
interesting that you talked about that being prescribed over there. I kind of wonder how long that might take to make it across the waters to us, but
Hmm.
it will be an
Right,
interesting day when it does. So
right.
I'm excited that you're getting that accreditation. I think Indiana children have a lot to gain from it. So
Yeah.
that'll be
Yeah,
really
likewise. And there are existing practitioners, not a great number, but in Indiana even, and then a number of others. The program I'm involved in was, made possible by a state grant, and so there is a cohort of us also, going through. And so, yeah, so it could be that we're seeing more of this, right? Offered through a parks department or through, other sort of cultural institutions, in our region. And so yeah, I think if anything, it's gaining traction and attention, and as you said, it could be something that is more commonly accepted, even in a medical type of model.
I think it might be. I know that Camptown leads after school programs with a mindful bent. We will call it that. Um, Tell me about some of those practices.
Yeah. So yeah, we have a range of after school programs, and I would say we do try to weave elements of self-regulation and social emotional skills into a wide range of our programs, and have had pretty good success in doing so. And so in an after school type of setting, we might spend intentional time in nature and just build up some stamina to either be still in nature or be making observations of the trees. And so we've had groups that have adopted a tree. We might have a sit spot and sort of come to identify the things that are around us, the other beings in our sit spot, and maybe even map those. And I think as it pertains to sort of with a mindful bent, I mean, we are teaching some self-regulation practices, as well. And so helping kids, which, developmentally appropriate based on age and skill level of kids, it looks a little bit different than it might for adults, or certainly at high school versus an elementary age. But we're adopting some practices from an evidence-based model called TBRI, which stands for Trust-Based Relational Intervention, and gets into sort of windows of capacity, right? And so we may help kids identify, that I'm in blue mode, which is a shutdown mode. I'm in high stress. I'm in chronic stress. I'm overwhelmed. Then, there's the green mode that might be a regulated or a middle kind of mode, or there might be a red. Sorry, I flipped this but red is the overwhelm or the stress mode. Blue is the low. It's a low
Sad.
mood, or it's a sad mood. It's a sort of slow in thought. I might be hungry, might be thirsty, tired, things that are going to impact, my energy level and my outlook. But what we want to do is give kids a vocabulary for that and help them identify where they are. And that to me is a mindfulness practice or a mindfulness connection. So where are you right now? How are you? And beyond the surface, I'm fine. Is like, where do you fall on this right now? Right. And like, what is causing you to be there? What's causing you to be there? And then observing that, being curious about that. And in some cases there's ample time to and attention for staff or for other kids to lean into that, help somebody process through. And at other times it's building just a habit of checking in with ourselves, right? And of being mindful of our emotional state, and the way our body is telling us things if we listen, right? In terms of the stress response, or that low mood, and sort of what are my unmet needs, or what are unsolved problems. But stopping to pay attention is, in some ways, the hardest part in today's day and age. And so helping kids to do that is one thing that we try to weave in through social emotional learning type of practices.
So run us through that again, what the colors are.
Yeah. Yeah. Blue is that low mood, or kind of a sad, down, anxious, right? Green being, a regulated state, kind of an optimal zone. There may be healthy levels of stress, and it doesn't mean there's nothing going on, but then red is overwhelm. I'm heightened, I'm angry, I'm very frustrated, very anxious, very concerned, and kind of in an elevated mood. And so again, those are the windows of capacity that we're working to bring to kids.
I like that a lot. I've often said that one of the greatest gifts that learning how to be more mindful has given me is the opportunity to check in with myself. So I think in the past I had been kind of running on autopilot and not recognizing that there were things from previous days, weeks, months, even years that I was carrying around and spreading unnecessarily.
Yeah.
We can do that. But there's also a choice to tend to ourselves, to say, okay, I am overwhelmed. I am in the red zone. And what can I do about that? I don't need to just, blah, put that on everybody else. I can look to myself and others in a healthful way to address the red. And it's not to just be avoided, running from it doesn't do any good. So
Right.
recognizing it is a big part of the battle. So I'd like to hear from you what mindfulness is, how you would define it in layman's terms, or how you kind of define it for yourself.
Yeah, I guess I think of mindfulness as just kind of being conscious or aware of a thing or of ourselves, right? And I think by and large, the mindfulness movement is about self-awareness, that I think can extend to kind of other awareness, or sort of awareness of our environment. And so I think about it in that way. And I think did you want me to elaborate on kind of how that plays
However you want
into
to go.
sort of my okay.
Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, I think for me personally, what that looks like is I for me being outdoors is huge for that. But I do have sort of a morning routine that I like to practice, and it definitely involves a sort of a spiritual element of scripture reading and prayer and contemplation. But folks who live around me are that walk their dogs, they see me on the porch, right? And so there's a porch, there's a cup of coffee, there's that time, and my kids know, they're like, if I don't see that, he's out probably out on the porch, right? And it's that quiet time in the morning that allows for me to one check in with myself, right? As you say, but kind of start thinking about regulation and but also start thinking about the day, what's ahead, and what are my intentions, what are my hopes for those interactions and those different elements of my day, and what people might be in my path, that there's something going on in their world as well, or there's I don't believe any of those things are sort of accidental, and so I think it is setting my intentions toward and my hopes for the day as well. And so that's how sort of I experience it. And I really love mindful moments in nature and in wilderness. So sitting at a mountain view or listening to a stream trickle by, like to
Mhm.
me, I can stop and just be enamored in those spaces and really have some productive, and valuable sort of mindfulness in those spaces.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I like that a lot. I'm wondering, it sounds like you've had a morning routine for a good while, and I appreciate you sharing about that. I think that's a value to learn from one another, how we spend
Mhm.
our mornings to prepare for our day, get more centered before we start. I'm wondering if you are able to share about your path to mindfulness. Maybe it started a long time ago, or maybe it's something that's kind of bubbled up. Is there, or maybe there's not even a specific point in time, but I'm
Mhm.
curious how that kind of got folded into who you are.
Yeah, I think just observing habits and approaches of others, people who I respect, and kind of, either hearing people speak of habits that they have mindfulness wise, or and thinking of a morning routine wise, of just the sort of the spiritual disciplines are often used, and meditation being one of those, right? That as a habit, and looking to instill elements of that in my own life. And I think realizing, like, as I become an adult, of just how stressful life can become, right? And or at least how stressful I've let elements of life become, and having four kids, age 12 and under, and two sort of two career household, right? That my wife and I are in. Like it is important to find the things that bring us back to our core identity, that bring us back to a sense of groundedness, and a sense of stability, because life brings us plenty of trouble, right? Plenty of stress, plenty of unknowns. And so what is our base there? And so I would say, yeah, just adopting practices that I've heard others have, or seen others have, or others have encouraged me with. And I think more recently, using the term mindfulness, right, in the last 5 to 7 years, and particularly in the kind of social emotional learning and environments of public education. And so that's probably where, have had more exposure there. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
Excellent. I'm wondering, how would you describe to us, you started to earlier, and I'm wondering if there's anything else there, how being in nature is mindful. And I'm thinking about
Mm,
this. I heard about your experience, how you can have those really deep moments, maybe it's looking at a mountaintop, or hiking along a path. But I'm wondering how you would describe nature being mindful for kids.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think, largely similar to what I described for myself, but certainly those awe-inspiring moments can bring you into that. And so when you encounter something that is awe-inspiring, and that can both be on a majestic, large scale, or at a very minute. Oh, wow! Look at the look at the wiggly legs of the millipede. Wonder how many of those there are, right? And observing those things, I think, can draw us, into a mindful awareness of our surroundings. But I think the harmony of nature is something we try to expose kids to and talk about that as well, and just that there are interconnected components of that. But it is, as a system, it's generally going to produce a level of harmony and sustainability until or unless that's disrupted by some force. But that's worth observing, and that's worth considering, and in some cases that can help even draw us into a greater sense of peace and harmony. So doing that with kids, and I think it might be that it's on on a hike where we have a quiet time, that just a guided solo quiet time. It might be that it's in a cave where we turn all the lights off and ask children to be quiet, which, as you can imagine, is not all their first instinct, right?
I can only imagine the resounding shrieks.
Exactly, exactly. So we try to prep them, especially if it's a tight cave. Like one of our favorites is Wolf Cave down in McCormick's Creek State Park, which is, of course, still rebuilding from the devastating tornado this spring. But Wolf Cave, is tight, and so but it's very short and very good for introductory experience. But what does our body do? And we'll literally walk kids through that. What's your body telling you to do when it is dark and it is quiet? And what do you notice even about, like, what feelings or sensations are coming to you when you experience the stillness and the dampness and quietness and it's pitch black, or occasionally on an overnight program, it's in stargazing, that kind of observing the clear night sky. And so I think there are times where we will, like with the time that you visited the program with your son, where we'll do like a walkthrough of some breathing exercises and try to understand what level we're at, and try to bring it down into a calm and a more receptive state to perhaps sit and discuss, or sit and learn something about it. So I hope I'm answering the question.
You are.
Okay.
You really did. I'm wondering how mindfulness has impacted your life.
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think others have commented to me that I'm able to keep perspective in stressful moments, right? That I'm able to bring others along. The highs aren't too high, but the lows aren't too low, and bring others along towards some bigger vision, or a collective vision. And people see stability, in me. Now, I may feel at times like I'm kicking like a duck under the surface or something like that. But I do think having mindful practices, morning routines, and this sort of self awareness, I think, is really critical to being able to have a presence of stability, and a presence of groundedness, and to encounter the difficult things and be present with those, right? And say, either this is hard, and I know there's another side to it, or this is really good, and we're going to celebrate this and rejoice in this. And so to not pretend, you said earlier, but to not avoid those things, not to pretend that they're going to go away, and so I think mindfulness has been a component of dealing with those elements in my life, and I think in my career, I think in my family, and so yeah, I would say those are a few ways that mindfulness has impacted my life.
Tell me about a story in which mindfulness has positively impacted Camptown kids?
Yeah, great question. I think I could come up with several. The one that comes to mind was a trip I was fortunate to lead to Rocky Mountain National Park. And for those who have been, the Purple Mountains majesty and sort of glacier capped, beautiful granite mountains and forests, and elk that'll wander through the campsites, and beautiful part of our country. For everyone on that trip, except for myself and our other leader, it was a completely new place. And so we were tent camping, and we again, the elk were wandering through the campsite, right? But one morning, we took a slow morning, and it was maybe 40 or 50 degrees, and chilly. But we just had some solo time and some journaling time, and allowed the kids to be able to sit and observe what was around them. But I gave several prompts that they could use to sort of observe what was inside of them as well. And then and there was no collection of it. There was no sort of assignment that they must, and some did and some didn't. And one, in fact, drew a beautiful picture. But when they came back, we gave them a chance to share, if they wished to, about their experience. And some of the things that were shared were just awesome, to be honest. One kid, who was probably the most reluctant to say positive things about anyone else in the whole group. And this is an older teen, right? So high school age teen. He's got a real kind of, I don't know, hardened persona, perhaps. And but just shared about his feelings about a very close family member having serious health issues, and his concern about that, right? And then looked around the group and was like, "You all are beautiful people. I'm glad I'm here with you." And we were just like, you're paying attention to other people. You're willing to. That was such a vulnerable moment, for him, that came out of this silent, sort of meditative, journaling time. And I think was really beautiful. And what it did too is it broke the ice for others to have moments of vulnerability and share in that space as well. And so I can get a little tickle just kind of thinking about, like, a chill of just what happened in that next 20 minutes was really powerful. And kids, were referencing that as, a moment of that point, of the trip. Now, some of them were like waiting for solo time to end, right? But they still got value out of it. We had another share about just how his life was sad, but that he was thankful for people around him that helped him to push through it. And so I think those are where some of the perhaps life lessons, can be internalized. And I'll never forget that moment, of gathering the kids up at the campground, Moraine Park, in Rocky Mountain National Park.
Amazing. I remember it's probably been about a decade ago. I went to, they have a big kind of outdoor festival at Fort Bend, in the northeast side of Indianapolis. And I met Dawn, who used to run Camptown, so full of energy and enthusiasm for the great outdoors. I don't think I've ever seen him not in hiking boots, now that I think about him.
Maybe Chacos, or maybe some Tiva sandals. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So there's a summer Dawn. But I remember talking with him at their booth about how Camptown had taken this group of kids out, and there was one of the kids in particular kind of calling out one of the kids that was kind of having the biggest difficulty. And this kid was on the spectrum and was really struggling to be there, didn't want to be there, was kind of going kicking and screaming. And within 24 hours of this trip, this kid started opening up, started talking in ways that just blew everyone away. And it just felt like being in nature, being mindful, that had kind of healed a part of him, if even for that time. It was just really powerful. And so that story hooked me. Dawn got me with a story, and kind of started a little of my connection with Camptown. That story will always live with me, because it was really impactful to think about how nature could help kids. So I'm so grateful for what
Yeah.
you guys do. I know that you've been
Mm,
at my kids' school up until now,
mm.
and they've recently changed schools. So we'll try to get you in there too,
Right.
to their new schools, because I have to say, my son, pretty much the only reason he attended fourth grade was so he could go to the Camptown sleepover. And then because of COVID, he was not able to go. And it was just the most heartbreaking thing. So maybe for the COVID kids, maybe we could work something out. And just throwing that out
Yeah.
there to the universe to maybe
Good
see if we can
idea.
right
Good
the
idea.
wrong.
Yeah.
That might help things out. He was so excited. What a neat thing you guys do, and what amazing
Mm,
opportunities that the kids have, not only to experience nature, but to get to know themselves a little bit more, to trust themselves in nature, and to trust their
mm,
peers in nature, to trust adults to guide them
mm,
in just beautiful spaces. So
mm.
I'm so
Yep.
excited by the work that you guys do, and I'm grateful for it, as I know many
Thank you.
parents in our state are. Do you guys only service Indiana, greater Indianapolis area? I can't recall how far you are now.
Yeah, it tends to be central Indiana. We're not opposed to further away, and occasionally we field inquiries from groups out of state or do through a multi-organization partnership. We've served some kids from New Orleans the last couple of years because of a connection with a local organization here that they have. And so yeah, partnerships are at the root of what we do, and so we're always open to considering new opportunities. But yeah, the heart is in Marion County and the surrounding counties, with occasional forays to, Brown County or Howard County, so central Indiana is our core. But yeah, we're not bored. We have a wonderful lineup of partners and things already scheduled, but we are always open to new partners and new inquiries. And so including, your children's new school as well.
Yes. Well, and we'll get to that. I want to make sure
Yeah.
we equip the listeners with all the things that you offer, and how folks can get in touch to engage with those. At
Yep.
this juncture, though, I would love for you to tell our listeners what one of your favorite mindfulness practices is,
Mm,
what one of them is,
yeah.
and if you would lead us in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm happy to. I will say I'm gonna lean into my growth edge here, with because I, am learning through the Association for Nature and Forest Therapy, a set of what they call invitations, what we call invitations, right? And so they frame these as a series of invitations, and one that is in what's called the standard sequence is called pleasures of presence. And so it's about obviously being very aware of our own self, our presence, and what might be immediately around us. And so, yeah, do you want me to, for 2 or 3 minutes, just kind of go into it? Okay.
Lead us,
Uh, I'm
Brent.
I'm going to rely on a little bit of guide here. Like I said, as I'm practicing, in this new pleasures of presence. So, to start, I will just ask and invite you to close your eyes, and then let's just take a few breaths, um, just normal breaths, just noticing what the sensation of breathing feels like, and noticing that right now we're in this thing that we call our own body, and you're in your own body. And I wonder what it feels like to be in your body. And if your body is asking for something, feel free to give your body what it needs. And notice that right now we're doing this thing that we call sitting. And or perhaps some other mode of being still. And I wonder what it feels like to be doing this. And where can you feel this in your body? Perhaps noticing the support of the seat against your legs or the floor that's holding up your feet, and just noticing. And now shifting our attention to the skin, I wonder what sensations we can feel with our skin. Perhaps holding our hands out in front of us, holding your hands out in front of you, and just holding the air in our hands and letting the air hold you. Perhaps lightly bringing the hands together. I wonder what it feels like when the skin touches itself. Perhaps using those hands to explore some of the textures that you're carrying with you today. Maybe that's your hair, maybe a shirt, maybe a piece of jewelry, a ring, or a watch. What does that feel like? And then this progression, and Amy, I'll gently draw you back into the space and time that we're in together. This progression is very helpful outdoors to then progress to be able to touch the earth, perhaps, or a being that we're around outside. And then it might be that we touch the dirt. It might be that we then smell dirt. It might be that we then experience some degree of taste. Might not be the dirt, but it might be an object, right? And then even the sounds, and then the sound mapping of what's what we're hearing around us. And so that's just in the first few minutes of what can be a 15 or 30-minute invitation called Pleasures of Presence through the nature and forest therapy guide training. So I hope that was okay. Again, very new for me. I'm learning these practices as we speak.
I appreciate you leaning into the growth edge. I felt like the two parts that were interesting to me was that we're holding air. I'd never done that
Hmm.
before. It kind of felt similar to the first time that I remember being led through feeling the air on my skin, but it felt kind of like a similar sensation of, oh yeah, being really aware kind of that space in between me and the air. I like that quite a bit. I also liked, I think it's a really practical thing, just kind of in that quick body scan there towards the beginning,
Yeah.
asking ourselves what does our body need in that moment. I straightened up and you might have heard a few
Yep.
cracks in my back and took a deep breath. It just felt nice to
Yeah.
say, hey, I need that. I'm going to take care of it. How many of us work for hours on end in the same position at a computer, not realizing, oh my goodness, maybe I just need to roll
Yep.
my shoulders a little bit and it'll be fine. But that's
Yeah.
a
And we
good
can
awareness.
be, yeah, I'm glad, because that's what it does for me too. I mean, it's easy to just get stuck in our thinking brain and sort of lose sight of what our body is doing in the ways that we work too, and with technology, right? But the particular training, that I'm involved in, is it's about invitational language. And so noticing right now, and is your body asking for something, even being far more open-ended than, like, because I've done these practices before, like maybe in a counseling session, or in some sort of a guided meditation that you can listen to. But the what is your body asking for, a little more open-ended. It's not like forcing you to have tension in your body, but if it's there, you'll probably listen to it and hear it, and like you did, adjust or react and respond. And so the language of invitation is an important part of the training that I'm involved in. So
I'm going to go off script for a second and lead into
yeah.
my growth edge. So I'm curious if you ever encounter any pushback for doing mindfulness. I know that Camptown has its roots in a faith-based mission. Do you encounter that, or is that something that's kind of more in the past? I'm curious and if you do encounter that, where's maybe the common ground? Because you seem like a peacemaker. So I'm kind of wondering how you approach that.
Well, I think there's a lot of common ground. I do. It's probably a longer conversation, but I think there's a ton of value whether someone is a person of faith, a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, right? But like knowing ourselves and being in touch and in tune with ourselves. And I think most faith traditions would probably believe that has value regardless of what sort of the larger, truth, that they may ascribe to would also uphold. And so I think in that sense, there's common value, in practices of mindfulness, and they can allow us mindful practices, right, to like be check in with ourselves and take care of ourselves, but then be more useful to others, right, in the world and in our relationships. And so I think most faith traditions would also value that, right, and value sort of the positive or the sort of encouraging and meaningful interactions and community building exercises that can come from someone who is grounded. And so I think there's a common grace of mindfulness being important across the spectrum of people's belief systems. And so I think it's an element that, again, I think, as you said at the beginning, like I don't know that we claim to be mindfulness experts, but I think we see the value in helping kids to understand what's going on inside themselves and the world around them. And I think so we will sort of adapt or adopt practices that can bring us towards that goal of just healthy youth development for the kids that we get to interact with.
Absolutely. I've been pleasantly surprised just even how mindfulness has really been woven into educational cultures. I mean,
Mhm.
from a very young age, helping with the self-regulation, I'm really happy to see that becoming more common amongst our schooling systems. So I'm glad to hear about the common ground. I was just kind of curious, your honest take on that. So thank you for sharing that. I am wondering what parents can expect if their kids attend a Camptown program. You might need to refresh us a little bit on the things that you do. So my son was involved it was during the day. So you guys
Yeah.
came and got the kids, or the kids' school brought them to a park. Can't remember how it all worked out. Anyway, tell us how it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a wide range of, outdoor adventure and nature programs that we do provide. Most are in partnership with a youth organization or a school. And I think in your son's instance was most definitely with the school. And so this time of year, here we are at the start of a school year. More of our programming is school based. And so that includes school day programming that we call Wilderness Adventure Academy. And that's in partnership with the school, in some cases overnight and multi-day programming. In other cases, that's after school, or it's targeted for a group of students with unique needs. We have what's called the Trailblazer program that works with kids with special needs in school-based setting, and then our summer programming tends to be with non-school, obviously, summer based organizations. So that could be day camps, that can be residential camps, and community centers and boys and girls clubs. And so what parents can expect is they can expect caring staff, to be guiding their kid, their child into an introductory experience with nature that should have components connected to life skill development and social emotional skill development that is about sort of growing up healthy, right? And so that's through activities like camping and canoeing and for the indoor climbing wall that we've talked about, and through backpacking and hiking. And so outdoor adventure activities are again, the venue or the classroom by which those skills and goals are worked towards. And so that's what parents can expect.
Love it. Thank you for running us through that. As you were talking earlier about camping, the question came to me. I'm wondering what you like most about camping in that environment, surrounded by children. And what is the most challenging part of that, Brent?
That's great. Yeah.
Do you come back with any sleep is maybe the question.
Right. The word challenge is in our mission statement. Interesting, right? Like challenge, mentor, and teach. And so, yeah, there are times where we're like, oh, yeah, we're asking people to do something that is hard, at various times, including, and for some people, spending the night outdoors. I know what I will say. I mean, I've got a hammock myself that I use for camping, overnight camping, a tent hammock, and I sleep much more comfortably, off the ground and in the gentle sway of a hammock than perhaps I did for years on the ground. And so, the hardest part, I think, is being able to, anticipate and plan for, the needs of diverse groups and of sort of a wide range of abilities and sort of readiness. And then, what we've gotten really good at is sort of matching, their goals or their intentions with, a certain type of program or, certain activities. And so what's the best part is the aha moments, the level of enjoyment and getting feedback from kids and adults afterwards of, I didn't know I would like this as much as I did, or I didn't know I could be a leader until you let me, or until I had this chance. And now I see that I can, and perhaps sort of a microcosm into what could be, a trajectory, changing event for a young person's life. And so those are certainly the most valuable moments. And then there are kids who, this is Camptown is their first exposure, and then they want to do more. And so seeing them get involved in, for instance, our youth leaders program, and but falling in love with some of the same things that we do, that's really rewarding.
You talk about leadership development. I'm curious what that looks like with the kids. Are there chances for kids to lead the pack in a hike, or give us an example of how?
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah. So, on our multi-day trips, we'll have a variety of leadership responsibilities that are bestowed upon kids for an entire day. And we'll let them, in some ways volunteer. And then there might be a bit of, of deliberation among adults of who should be encouraged to volunteer for certain
we
different
call that
opportunities.
voluntold. Yes.
Voluntold, exactly. Yes. And it might be that they're the actual group leader for the day, in which case they're making, important decisions for their group about, where, with help from other roles. We call a navigator is the person with the map, but the leader is ultimately going to make the call of which direction are we going to go. And we tend to allow them to make low risk mistakes,
like what? Give us an example of a low risk.
Make the wrong turn, go down the wrong trail for a little while, right? And so, and then
face
sort of
the music of all their friends saying, we had to walk 2 more miles because of you.
Well, 2 miles would start to get into higher risk, just in terms of the elements
water
that
and snacks.
Those
are the two. Yeah. It's part of the holy grail of hiking with kids: water and snacks.
Right. But if we lose sight of the trailblaze, this marking, our directions. Gosh, well, this is interesting. I wonder, where's the trailblaze? But then coaching the student through, or the child through, being able to make that decision, and then how to communicate that, to the broader group, and how to create sort of a culture, a miniature culture for a period of time within that community that is of encouragement, that is of, what's possible, and is of, giving caring feedback when needed. And so, yeah, so then we'll do things like at the end of the day, we'll do a roses and thorns type of discussion around the campfire, which is basic sort of highs and lows. And but at times we get to the place of, sharing a rose and being able to give a rose to another person. And so often that's about the roles that kids took during the day, and they're sort of thanking and encouraging another, for that. And so there's a real, social, power, that, a dynamic that's built among a group. A kid who was nervous about taking the responsibility, but gets some affirmation and finds some success and some elements of that, it is one way that we can help develop leaders.
That's wonderful. I would love to hear a little bit about how folks can get involved, how they can get their kids into, maybe get their schools involved. Talk a little about the crux, some of your events that are coming up, potentially even just ways people could donate or give in different formats to help make what you do possible.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's always as a nonprofit, we're fundraising for the majority of our revenue, and we're grateful to be able to provide our programming at low cost or no cost to a large majority of our participants. And so we do have a big fundraising event coming up September 15th in 2023 here in Indianapolis. And so we're open to guests and sponsorships for that event. I think we're nearing the end of ticket availability for that particular event. But it's a fun one. And then we are always year round open to individuals who wish to invest in our mission, and sort of corporations who would be interested in it as well. And all of that information is available on our website, camptown.org. And then we do have a couple of open climbs scheduled for the fall. And I think the next open climb, is in September 20th here at Camptown at the Crux, and then in November as well. And there's registration; those are free and open to the public. We do ask for a registration or an RSVP, and so those are available on our website as well. And so and then of course follow us on social media if anyone would be interested in learning more about the organization. We are at Camptown Indy, and I'm excited for welcoming any new interest into our mission.
I'm curious, the age for the minimum age for climbing. Also curious about the grade range that you serve when you collaborate with schools.
That's both great questions. Typically with schools, it's grade 3 and up, and so we'll go all the way through grade 12. As for climbing, age 6+, and so we're not allowing the 5-year-olds and under to participate in our wall. They can come, but they would just be with the parent or the adult supervision for that time. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Now, if someone like me would like to get you involved in our school, how does that work? How do we do that?
Yeah. Great question. We're open to receiving those inquiries to info@camptown.org. And so an email is an easy way. Of course, the website has reminders of how to do that as well, to just drop us an email to our program team or give a call. And so, phone number listed there on the website too. And those are ways that we'll then connect with a program manager, a program director, to be able to plan specifics of a particular program, and just hear what are the goals, what are the needs, and introduce a little bit of what Camptown does.
Wonderful. I think we are to the closeout section, but it includes a little bit more of a growth edge for us here, Brent. Yeah. I would like to lead us in the Glowy Daily Reflection Practice, which is included in my book, The Chaos Antidote, A Fable About Mindfulness, and its companion workbook. It is an acronym that I developed to kind of center myself every morning. Did it this morning. Sometimes I do it in journal form, which is what I did this morning. Sometimes I just speak it out loud. Sometimes I think it. And I will lead you in it right now. So the G stands for grateful, something you're grateful for. The L stands for lift up, something that might need resources for yourself or for someone else. The O is for observe, paying attention, what's going on inside and around you. What is something you observe? The W is for wholesome intention. You talked also about setting intention and how important that is. And that could be for your day or for the next few moments or in a relationship. And the Y is for you are. You're going to send yourself off with a positive affirmation about Brent. Brent, you are. So we'll start from here at the G. What are you grateful for?
Yeah, by so many things, but it all comes back to I'm grateful for people and relationships in my life, and I will say for my wife, Alex.
She's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk about lift up. What's something that might need some resources for you or others?
Yeah, I am particularly burdened at this moment with some serious health concerns shared with me by some colleagues of their family members, and so I would lift up those individuals for healing and for comfort and peace.
What do you observe?
Mm, yeah, I think uh, I observed my body is more relaxed than it was an hour ago, just in terms of, getting to have this great conversation with you. I observe that, um, yeah, I'm thirsty. That's what I observe. I'm not used to talking this long, in a short period of time. I prefer a higher listening ratio. And so I'm observing that as well. In fact, here's my water. Mm, yeah. Um, I think my intention is to be authentic and be loving with those I encounter.
What about your you are? You to
Mm,
build yourself up before you head out.
okay. Um, you are where you need to be. So just be there.
Excellent. I love that. Well, Brent, it's been amazing having you on the show. So grateful for what Camptown does for not only my kids, but for the greater Indianapolis area, and who knows, even beyond that. So thank you for your service. And I want to let the guests know that today's show is sponsored by Good Aim Communications. You can learn more about Good Aim Communications at goodaimcommunications.com. So from my heart to yours, may you live with ease. This is your host, Amy Morgan, signing off.